Колеги, продовжуємо робочий день. Зараз буде...
Okay, let's continue our working day. We will be speaking on the host providers working with state security service. I give floor to Andriy Hvatkevych, director of the NIC.UA, Oleksandr Olshanskyi, head of the working combating cybercrime, and Tatiana Popova, head of the Internet Association of Ukraine. Good afternoon. My name is Andriy Hvatkevych. I'm director of the NIC.UA. On the 7th of April, the officers of the Security Service of Ukraine, they seized our equipment in one of our centers in Kiev, and 30,000 sites of our customers have been damaged. So the aim of that was to block some sites of separatists, and we were ready to block the sites, but this seize of equipment didn't influence on the separatist sites. So we would like that we have a dialogue jointly with the State Security Service of Ukraine and providers, and that our customers of hosting providers, for them not to have any damage, not to have any losses. So this is the list of our customers that were affected after that action of the State Security Service. I will give floor to Oleksandr Olshanskyi to continue. As you understand, my position provides for work in the working group against cybercrime with the representatives of Ministry of Interior, Interpol, State Security Service, and Internet Association of Ukraine. We have certain experience accumulated in this sense, and our position is very simple. Everybody must be responsible for his or her job. We understand that the situation in the country is rather difficult, and of course some problems would exist with the separatist resources, with cyber security, etc. Everybody must do his work. On the other hand, in the law on the fundamentals of regulatory policy, there are articles saying that any sanctions must be beneficial for society versus the harm for society. And I believe that any actors to this process, representatives of Ministry of Interior, State Security Service, they must minimize the damage that is being incurred to the opposite side there. On the other hand, some hosters, they could send any inquirer from one instance to another court instance, and demanding that the law be observed very strictly. We may pull the leg in this sense for a long time, and for a long time to allow adversary resources to continue their work in Ukrainian territory. I am very convinced. I'm convinced that the traffic should not be limited, and the resources that are in contradictory with the Ukrainian legislation, say very evidential calls for separatism, etc. Such resources must be closed. If they say, okay, we travel to some other country, okay, let them travel there, and that other country will be responsible in that case. But it is not that easy for them to move. That's why our standpoint is as follows: everybody must do his work, and we must support each other in doing this job nicely. One thing is, if somebody comes and demands some money or say grab something from you, the other story is when somebody come to you with constructive offers, and I believe that bigger companies must push any effort ahead. Means the law enforcers should understand that they have great powers, and of course they could ruin business, they could incur damage to many customers, many thousands of customers. At the same time, it doesn't bring any good to the investigation. That's why I would like to see certain dialogue here. Unfortunately, this valve does not work specifically in the regions, so I call everybody to move toward this end. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lieutenant Popova. I'm head of the Internet Association in Ukraine. We repeatedly organize different press conferences associated with the cases when illegally they confiscate or seize the equipment from the operators, providers, and the publishing centers. And certainly, the documents which I've seen, which were the basis for the seizure of the servers in UK, they were rather properly registered, but they had the right to seize or to confiscate the equipment or servers. But from the point of view of logic or the common sense, the actions were, let's say, excessive, because the whole information which was of interest to the SBU could be copied, and you know that already all the modifications to the criminal code are in force. And according to those changes and modifications, the seizure of equipment is an extreme measure with a specific indication what kind of equipment should be seized or confiscated. This is number one. And number two, what I would like to emphasize is that the seizure equipment very often doesn't give the necessary results. In particular, that was the case with NIC.UA, case because they had to block the domains, and this required absolute different actions, and not the, let's say, the disconnection from hosting several thousands of users or customers, which are actually law-obedient ones, and they were using the hoster services, and they paid rather big money for to be provided services in this country. So what is the results of actions? Oleksandr knows about that, because a certain number of hosters, they lose part of their customers or clients or users, because those actions lead to, let's say, I would say, not really correct or the expedient justified actions, and this leads to the loss of confidence or trust to this market in Ukraine. Of course, this results in the financial losses of different companies or all the players in the markets, because the sites slowly, gradually, but surely shift to the foreign countries. And sometimes the foreign companies come here from Poland, from Estonia, and Latvia. They tell us about their data centers, and they invite to their countries, to their hostings, either those companies which are located here and they use it as the agents or intermediaries, or they use the very huge or large resources, which results in losing the hard currency from this country, which goes to some other countries, and virtually the Ukrainian brains go there instead of giving some incomes or bringing some incomes to this country. Thank you. Your questions?
I would like to continue, and in fact, we have already had a good practice with the State Security Service of Dnipropetrovsk region. Last year we had problems with the Gubarev site, and it was very efficient work, joint work with the security service in Dnipropetrovsk region. They prepared all the necessary documents and they blocked this resource. As well, we stopped some other resources with all the necessary set of documents. But in this situation, under question, the security service officers, they failed to contact with their Dnipropetrovsk colleagues, but in fact we could did it. Now we invite everybody to cooperate efficiently, and State Security Service and Ministry of Interior should understand that hosting providers and registers, they are ready to cooperate, and we may exercise our joint offers. Any questions to the speakers? Probably any comments or clarifications? Mikhailo Gluchovsky, Glавком. Where is the borderline between the proper actions or legitimate actions of law enforcers and violations, the violations you mentioned here in this press conference? I would like you to understand, I'm not ready to confirm that there were any violations from either side. Both sides could work properly in legal sense, but the damage could be very big. Both sides, including law enforcers, they have a lot of powers and rights. Again, the businesses in this country have a lot of mechanisms protecting them from power abuse. And when both sides start to confront, the damage is great. By the way, the borderline you mentioned, this is the question of proportionality and say common sense. Of course, we may arrest any criminal, but to give you an example, you never arrest the entire block of flats and then let free all the clean people. So we don't have any other way out. If any way out we have, with the less damage to society, to people who are not involved in any crime, then both sides must be eager to solve this issue, first of all in procedural sense, properly, legal way. On the other hand, to try not to hurt any body of the environment. Once again, I mentioned the law on the regulatory policy. It is black and white words there that even if any penalties or fines are applied, then the benefit from such sanctions must be higher than the losses to community, to society. So this is stated in the law. It is provided by the law. In fact, this is a common sense. So I believe that the borderline here is proportionality and, say, feasibility, so to say. The working group of now I'm heading, it is based on this principle because both sides, they have a lot of levers. The legislation in Ukraine is not that bad as they say, because legally business has a lot of mechanism to protect itself, as well as law enforcers. They have a lot of mechanism to do their functions. Thank you. Next question. Good afternoon. My name is Nikolai Kovalchuk. Asset management company. I am a victim, so to say, in this case. First question. For 13 days already our servers stopped. Many people, they failed to provide hosting, and many people, they have losses, and nobody mentioned that the losses include site development. Secondly, my situation is as follows. I have a corporate site, and according to legislation I must hang on my annual reports on this website, and if fiscal institutions, fiscal agencies would not see anything of that type in my website, they will impose a fine on me in the amount of 17,000 hryvnia. So the question is, who pays in that case? Law enforcers. The question for your first, the answer for your first question is nobody will pay. So if you'd like to have a fair answer, the fair answer is nobody pays. It's not a force majeure for me. I must have certain documents proving that me on my in the scope of my responsibilities did everything possible to. So legally this position is proper. Next question. The say estimated percent of customers that will leave hostings in this case. It is very difficult to make any forecasts here because we have various points of view. I would not like to say hit up advertising here. Of course, you could move abroad, but it involves certain costs and time to be spent. It's 2 hours of work or even 5 minutes of work, but in the future you would have to, in that case, to do this work once and once again. I couldn't tell you what percent I will take. Hopefully we will solve this issue. If we are speaking about technical side, I know that there's no problem with backup equipment. We have enough backup equipment to get everything alive again, but we must treat it properly in sense of procedures, and we must have copies of resources that are not illegal to deploy them again with the equipment that will be given back to you. Because physically it is easier to make seizure than to give it back. Some servers, etc. It is not very easy. Expert evaluation must be affected. So I believe that there is something like legal way of putting you back into here. But again, this is a goodwill of any investigator. So I believe that we must go step by step. We must start with a reserve or backup equipment, and then make all that 30,000 websites alive again. You see, here is a lot of people listed here. That's why this is, to my understanding, the way out here. There are two different aspects. First, what to do in order to not to have it again happened in the future. Second aspect is what to do immediately to cope with this situation. There are two different problems.
If I may, just a minute, I would like to add that the investigators try to meet us halfway. What Oleksandr mentioned a few minutes ago, we are working on getting all the copies required, and we believe and we hope that this will happen this week. So there are some positive progress here. So another question. Myself, maybe I don't know whether it's order or non-ordinary question, but there was the lack of coordination of the provider's opinion and SBU. Somewhere somebody maybe wrongly sent by mail the documents, and another party, let's say, give us the original copy, and all that ended according to the new criminal code and code of procedure. The SBU comes to you and takes whatever they want away. So maybe there is some kind of lack of coordination efforts of the legal services, whatever. So speaking about the future, how fruitfully you are going to coordinate your efforts and cooperate with them. The purpose of our press conference to publicly declare that we are prepared to cooperate and rather efficiently do that. Decision or judgment court was before the new laws were enforced. If there were some circumstances that the inquiries regarding those domains, we received last year yet. And we responded by the letter of law, according to the letter of law, and we mentioned that we were prepared to meet them halfway. But there were no legal grounds to block those resources. But understanding that the problem, we changed our contract and start to act a different way. We understand that the country goes through some changes and modification. We really in a difficult time, in dire straits, the war time, and we do not want the enemy resources to be active here. So we would like that everybody hears us, not only SBU, but also the host provider. Meaning to say that we need some cooperation, we have to find some common ground, common goals, and efficiently combat this specific challenge or problem. Are there any other questions from the audience to the speakers? There are no more questions. Well, if I may, I would like to echo what has been said. Once again, I would like to say When we say that we need cooperation, I would like you to understand specifically, we are not talking about, well, in no way we mean that we have to violate the rights of the users, for example, and to respond to the non-motivated inquiries of the law enforcement bodies or agencies. So that means that we do not have to violate the law. We would not say that SBU, instead of let's say, drawing up the motivated inquiries, just give us a call. No, we are not talking about violation of any laws. The only thing we mean is the principle of proportionality. So what happened? You said that one party was prepared the wrong or not proper, let's say, document, and another didn't want to receive it, and they escalated this problem until one party took over. And let's say the damage, resulting damage to the surrounding world, so to say, exceeded all the permissible levels. The question is whether always we have to use 100% of the authorities or the powers available to both parties involved. Maybe we can stop before reaching that maximum level. Well, maybe somebody did not send in the paper letter in paper, but just email letter. The other party could just say, please send us the paper copy. There is no violation of law here. And in this case, we can stop the escalation of the problem at a much lower level. That's what we mean. When we are talking about cooperation, both stakeholders, both parties involved, must be within the legal framework. But the problem in this case can be resolved at different levels of escalation of the problem. So what we mean to say, we should not escalate this problem too much and bring it to the top level without, unless this is really necessary. Because because it can be fraught with a lot of those who suffer from this escalation. And then if you're talking about the loss of 30,000 users, the customers, actually leads to the losses of all the professional players in this process, including the hosters, etc., etc. All of them suffer losses, the missed profit included, and seemingly in this case, all the parties involved, they act within the legal framework, like a human divorce. You can, for the purpose of divorce, you can use all the necessary, all the available tools, or you can come to an agreement much easier. And the same here. And the last question, please. Mr. Oleksandr, please voice up your version. So what was the starting point of this conflict? The time. The simple question is time. In my opinion, if you would like to know my opinion, I believe both parties involved escalated this conflict. Both parties. So initially somebody did not properly prepare the letter or whatever, and instead of putting this writing the proper document, they chose to escalate this problem. Next time they said go to court, instead of saying please give us such and such copy. To do that, you have to switch off the domains instead of blocking the sites. Just to give you an example, this is an absolutely engineering or technical problem, and we are talking about this plane. Not all the investigators understand from technical point of view what has to be done to get some result. So in principle, they do not block the site which are located outside of Ukraine. They need some time. Wait a minute. Well, I didn't got what you mean to say. No. On the contrary, if you block the domain, 24 hours later, because this requires some time to the announcements to spread over the internet. So if you block the domain, this resource will not work within this domain, irrespective where it goes. Of course, it can invent some other name for that, but this is a different story here.
Once again, we couldn't be responsible for the entire internet of the entire planet of Earth. We may be responsible for our small piece of that. The same way law enforcers, they could not fight separatism in the global scale. They are responsible for their own scope of responsibilities or their own job. So, and the trigger for this conflict was time, and this correspondence lasted for. It was only one inquiry. The last inquiry dated December, so it was enough time in order to solve this issue, to my understanding. On one hand, I couldn't be advocate of one this or that side. On the other hand, once again, we have damage, we have losses, and according to new procedural code, the investigator, he's a procedurally independent object, so he would like to exercise his preferential way of investigation. So this is a principle of proportionality and feasibility. Oleksandr already mentioned that he is head of working group in cooperation with law enforcers in fighting the cybercrime. 3-4 years ago, we tried to develop a document. We tried to convince law enforcers to approve this. The name of the document was Methodological Recommendations of Typical Inquiries of law enforcers they sent to hosters of internet market. We systematized all that. We were ready to teach anybody who compile that type of inquiries or requests. And in many cases, those requests and inquiries, they are technically very clumsy, and unfortunately, we failed to approve these recommendations, these instructions. But for a chain of years, starting from 2005, we cooperate very closely with the State Security Service of Ukraine, and they have a department of cybercrime fighting. So they have all the contacts of director of Internet Association. They have my cell phone number. I am ready to uncover my cell number for any investigator. Why not call us if you have certain hesitation? If you the question was just to block 5 separatist websites. If you do not understand, you don't have understanding between you and hoster, why not call me? Because we usually came to compromised decision. We managed to work with law enforcers not to damage anybody's business. Again, hosters, they are not enemies of Ukraine, or say they didn't land on this planet from space, traveling from space, and in many cases those telephone numbers are used properly when it is an emergency needs. If you remember, we had explosions in Dnipropetrovsk, so in many cases there is a need for manual control in the process. This is a working process. State Security Service, we cooperate with them for a long time already, and that's why I was surprised with the incident under question. So the process is more or less a smoothly going one. And this new procedural code, it is more complicated in a way. It gives much more freedom in escalation of any problem. You may escalate a problem practically up to any level. Okay, why was there a need to make a seizure of all the servers? So new procedural code, there's nothing like a special limit set up for a special case. So the principle of proportionality should be observed, but the problem is you couldn't describe it on the paper. So I suggest now that Andriy to settle the existing situation, and from our side, we being an association, we promise that we will try to prevent similar situations in the future. The most critical now is for us to have copies of the websites in order to recover the resources that are not separatist one. That's why we address investigators, please give us this opportunity to recover the servers. Thank you, colleagues. Unfortunately, our time is over. Hopefully the situation will be settled down in the near